Climate change and water security in Southern Africa, assessing conflict and coping strategies in KwaZulu-Natal. So the background for the study, I said that the impact of climate change to global peace and security has in recent years received increased scholarly attention. But the focus on the security implication of climate change was intensified after the 2007 United Nations Security Council debates on climate change as a threat multiplier. And in the light of this, Africa is identified as the continent highly vulnerable to climate change impact due to its high dependence on climate-sensitive economy, high poverty prevalence rates, weak institutional coping capacity, as well as poor social infrastructure. Clifford in 2009, as well as the Council on Foreign Relations in 2016, among other scholars, they argue separately that conflicts in Africa are largely driven by resource competition, which is masqueraded as issue based on politics, issue based on religion, as well as ethnicity. And then the prediction by the Institute of Social Security in 2012, as well as the UNDP in 2014 report, among others, were that conflict within sub-Saharan Africa will increase by 54% by 2030 as compared to the 1980 to 2000 period. And then the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research has said that while global temperature has increased by 0.8 degrees centigrade over the last century, the surface temperature around Southern African region has increased by 2.0 degrees over the same period. So this connotes that the region will experience extreme temperature increase at an average of 4 degrees centigrade, even if the greenhouse gas is below 2.0. A study conducted by Oxfam ISS in 2012, Colvin et al., Tupi and Visa, all show that water scarcity and stress is a fundamental developmental challenge in Southern African region. And as argued by Natuli and Netabu in 2012, human reaction to these impediments that are caused by climate change variables will generate issues that are capable of destabilizing the core functioning of societal process and institutions, thereby leading to conflict. The peculiarity of South Africa vis-a-vis climate change variable, especially water scarcity, is an issue of concern. The country is water stressed due to its arid and semi-arid condition, and between 1960 and 2003, the mean annual temperature increase, coupled with decrease in mean annual rainfall, as well as the frequency of floods and drought, has continuously exacerbated the situation of water stress in the country. And Lucas in 2015 argued that 98% of the country's water is already being used, and over 3 million people are without access to water in the country. This situation is believed to be will be worsened as a result of climate change impact. Rural communities with higher dependence on water resources are mostly in KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, and Limpopo province. And these provinces comprise of areas with the poorest community as well as under-resourced municipalities with little capacity to adapt to the condition of climate change impact, especially on water scarcity security. In the light of these arguments and on the premises of human security, the study assessed the security implication that will be triggered by the impact of climate change on water security of rural dwellers in KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa. It will investigate how this impact will trigger other security challenges among subsistence farming community, as well as the coping strategies and mechanisms that are employed by communities within KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa to water security issues. Based on literature, the enormous literature on the physical impact of climate change is yet to be matched with a similar engagement as related to human security implication of climate change impact on water security. And despite the increased focus on the nexus between climate change and security, there's been highly no agreed deterministic relationship between environmental and security dynamics. Within the literature on quantitative studies of climate change and security nexus, Field and Bozo in 2012, Rail and Clifford in 2012 results. Their result shows that there's a link between low precipitation and conflict, while Wood in 2010 linked freshwater scarcity and conflict. Olin et al. In 2012, as well as Will and Buha in 2014, argued that there's no relationship, while Sahale and Davis in 2014 talk about a negative relation between climate change and conflict. Within the qualitative study, within qualitative study, Shelley in 2014 established a link between climate change, resource scarcity, and conflict. And the child in 2014 also produced a mixed result. Adano Eta in 2012, Shelby and Hoffa in 2014 also have in their separate study produced a no-link result. While Schaefer and Eta in 2012 argued that there's a link between climate change and conflict if certain conditions are met. Based on these premises, Oling and Eta in 2014 also argued in their study that environmental changes affect conflict rates in areas with high violence rates. Based on the foregoing, the difficulty in establishing a nexus between climate change and conflict stems largely from the lack of consensus by climate security scholars on the operationalization of violence as well as mode of conflict. For the literature, though there's no robust empirical evidence for a general relationship between climate change and security, the argument of no relationship denies the idea that conflicts can arise if human basic needs, especially water, are not met. Adeleke Eta in 2014 argued that South Africa's approach to climate change has been towards establishing governance framework in terms of policy. And there are recent examples so that Ziforil Eta in 2014 however argued that this policy are yet to be translated into everyday practice within South African programs, especially within the rural communities. Huggins, in their study on governance of adaptation to climate change in water sector, argued that the institution within South Africa region lacked the ability to manage the challenges of droughts, floods, sea level rise, water supply shortage, increase in water population, and water-related diseases, among others. Oxford in 2010 argued that water resource management in South Africa is a time bomb waiting to explode. This is motivated by the continuous decline in water access by millions of population because of the decrease in water availability and poor resource management or privatization of water management. And as been argued, they say over 3 million people in South Africa are without access to water. In rural areas, people rely mostly on poorly managed natural resources. That's according to the Department of Environmental Affairs in 2011. Rural communities, like we say, with the highest dependence on water resources in KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, and Limpopo. These hardest hit provinces to water stress are also the country's most important food production areas. The gap noticed in the literature is that, like I said, the science of climate change, the climate change impact discourse of Africa tend to focus more on the science of climate change as relating to environment and climatic, as well as the ecological impact of climate change. The gap noticed in the literature is that comparatively, there seems to be relatively less focus on the human security impact of climate change as a driver to conflict and security challenges. The literature seems to give little importance to the crucial link between climate change and conflict on a lower scale, and by extension, human security. Most study undermines the propensity of individuals and groups engaging in conflicts, such as demonstrations, strikes, protests, riots, communal conflicts, etc., and the increase in localized tension, as well as increase in crime rates because of the direct or indirect climate change-induced impact on water security of the population under focus. Less attention has been focused on the severity of conflict within the context of water resource scarcity and environmental change in South Africa. An obvious gap is that most literature are more theoretical than empirical in creating a link between climate change and security. So the question the research seeks to answer is, what are the evidence of climate change impact on water security in Uranyanku district municipality, sorry for the pronunciation, in KwaZulu-Natal province? In what way are these challenges affecting livelihoods of rural farming communities? How does climate change impact on security contribute to violence or tension? And then what are the coping strategies or mechanisms that are adopted by individuals, states, communities within the rural communities? And then how effective are they? And then the last question is, what are the policy implications of the impact of climate change on water security in KwaZulu-Natal? The objective of the study is to examine the evidence of climate change impact, assess the impact of water insecurity on the livelihood of rural farming community, investigate how this climate change impact on water security will contribute to security situation within the study area, assess the coping strategies that have been adopted by individuals, community, as well as how effective these strategies are, and then examine the policy implication of the impact. On theoretical framework, the study adopts the eco-violence theory as provided by Homer Dixon as a theoretical framework of analysis. The theory argues that conflict within and among groups can arise as a result of the effects of the depletion in renewable natural resources leading to scarcity. The theory asserts that environmental scarcity can be supply-induced in the case of depletion in natural resources. It can be demand-induced because of the growth in population or increase in per capita consumption, and then it can be structural scarcity in terms of unequal social distribution and management of resources. The proponents of this theory argue that the scarcity of renewable resources, especially water, will have a significant effect on agriculture and economic productivity, as well as on institutional coping mechanisms, thereby affecting livelihood. If this situation will increase poverty and vulnerability of the already disadvantaged population. This situation will further widen the gap or division between ethnic privileges and communities, hence increasing the propensity for conflict in the society. The methodology of the research, the research methodology. The research adopts a mixed method of quantitative and qualitative data. The mixed method focuses on the collection of numerical as well as narrative data in order to obtain overlapping and different aspects of the research. On data collection, the study will involve a combination of data from observation, key informant interview, focus group discussion, as well as survey questionnaire. Structure and semi-structure in-depth interview will be conducted among a cross-section of community leaders within the study area. These are within the study area in Utumanga District Municipality. These areas are among the worst hit climate-induced water stress area in KwaZulu-Natal, hence the rationale for the selection of this community. Under sampling, a parallel mixed sampling where both purposive and probability sampling techniques will be used concurrently in the selection of participants. Based on this, a multi-level purposive simple sample random sampling method that will focus on the research question investigated will be employed. And then there will be a selection of 28 respondents for the key informant interview, comprising of 5 community leaders from the local municipality, 5 state officials, 15 farmers within the area, as well as 3 researchers on climate change from the academia. The aim of the interview is to gather information as relating to the research question raised. And based on Craigin and Morgan's 1970 sample size determination for known population with 95% confidence level, 385 questionnaires will be distributed to members within the area using a multi-level purposive simple random sampling method. The rationale for this is also based on the population of Utumayangu, which is estimated at 553,353 as of the 2011 census. On the focus group discussion, following the recommendation of Owebuzi and colleagues in 2007 for mixed method focus group discussion minimum, 8 groups will be formed from the selected study area. Under data analysis, for the qualitative data, the researcher will use thematic content analysis to generate and categorize the current theme with the aid of in vivo software. The data will be coded to allow for the generation of themes. And then under the quantitative data collected, it will be analyzed using the descriptive statistics to allow the researcher to understand the trend of the data. The data will also be analyzed using statistical package for social science. The novel statistical method for quantitative research will also be employed to test the variable from the quantitative data. This will be determined using this method of analysis. Another ethical consideration will also be considered throughout the study. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. The reviewer was Dr. Moore. Over to you.
Oh, so overall it was a good proposal, but there were some issues with it. So firstly, with regard to the brief description of the study and general impression, that section was certainly more than 500 words recommended. And going forward, there have been calls from the higher degrees committee at school level to make sure that proposals are in the guidelines in terms of length. So to avoid obstacles in the future, I would recommend that you abide by those word limits. please cut down and describe the study and research problems succinctly. The last 3 paragraphs of the section are arguably the key content of that section. The last paragraph should be expanded upon, as that is the area of the PhD. It seems to be an original study. The background and outline of the research problem, 1.3. This study's background is the threat of conflict related to water scarcity and how rural communities cope. The research problem isn't clear as it is not described adequately. What prompted this study, for example? Then the literature study was excellent. It was a thorough review, and again it was in excess of the guideline 1,000 words. However, so do take note, it's not focused at the moment on water security in Southern Africa, and in particular in rural KZN, as the title of your thesis indicates. What would be useful would be to point to earlier studies in this specific area, also what has been written on economic and institutional aspects of water scarcity or water security. You do allude to that, but you don't go into it. The literature review seems somewhat disjointed from the case study. There's no reference to coping strategies, for example, in the literature review, and there is no reference to work done or not done on Southern Africa and KZN in particular. The research problem, objectives, and research questions, it's not clear what is the problem. So that I might be missing it, but that needs to be stated clearly. Have there been, for example, violent episodes in the area, in the selected case study area that you suspect may have been caused by water insecurity, for example? Why has the selected case study been chosen? Principal theories seem adequate. The research methodology and methods seem fine. The structure of the dissertation I thought needed a bit more thought. The research methodology chapter 5 seems to come in a bit late. By the descriptions of chapters 6 and 7, it seems that interpretation and analysis of data will be done before presentation of data. Just make that clearer when the data itself will be presented. And referencing has been done well. Research schedule seems fine, although the drafting of 3 key chapters from May to September 2018, which is just 5 months, seems ambitious, but it's fine if agreed with your supervisor. And other comments that I had were to please attend to grammatical oversights in the text and try to bring this down, as I've mentioned, in terms of word count. And secondly, is the candidate proficient in the language of the study area? If not, has consideration been given to language for the administering of the questionnaires and the running of the focus group discussions? The ethical clearance form, your project is adequately described. I didn't have any issues there. You've adequately considered the ethical issues, and you've attached your research instruments, and they seem satisfactory. Yes, so that was, do I have to read the final box?
That's fine if you want to mention.
I recommended a pass with minor recommendations, and so those would be the ones that I mentioned in the rest of the review.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question. Answer? From college?
Okay, so we would have something to say.
Yes, Dr. Loka, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I haven't had the research proposal to read, so I might be speaking totally off as a tangent. But many years ago, when I worked at this, and I was working in psychology then, and it was in the 80s, and it was a time of unrest. I'm addressing the conflict area that was suggested in this proposal. But there were people there, and it's funny in my mind, but there were people who were looking at violent behavior, ambient temperature, and what they were arguing then, and I think it was kind of South African based, I really don't remember, but they were saying that the hotter the daily temperatures were, the more likely that there would be riots and violent protests at those times. And I don't know whether it might not make sense to perhaps go back and find some